So we did this in Dusseldorf a month ago, so it's repetition. However, every time we talk about these topics, it's always new. People have different ideas and expectations. So we want this breakout is primarily focused on the new platform. That's the 2.0 platform, and we want to focus on security, the stability, and the scalability aspects of it, so that you get a good ground up kind of view. And then in the afternoon at 2:30, we have a demo of the product as well. So I'd strongly encourage you to take a look at it if you have nothing else that's competing. So we can go ahead and get started. I think I'd like to start off by showing our. Is the thing moving? Or okay. All right. It looks complex, but fundamentally what it is we are completely cloud-based. Our solution is in Amazon, and we've hosted our solution in the Europe region. A lot of stringent data requirements, security requirements. So everything is in Europe. In fact, last year we were in Oregon in the US, and then we moved completely to Europe in less than 4 hours. So that's one of the true benefits of being completely cloud-based. Very, very layered approach, very services oriented. We have data stored in something called S3. So there's a little bit of Amazon kind of jargon here. But fundamentally what we're talking about is data completely encrypted in storage. We use indexing mechanisms in order to be able to retrieve and search data very effectively. Everything is queue-based, so we have a very good layer of stability. So there's buffering, there's first in, first out, distributed caching. And then we have a database agnostic for sub patterns. So in other words, tomorrow if we decide we want to add Postgres, and day after tomorrow we say, no, we need Oracle there. The changes that we need to make are relatively simple, as opposed to a traditional web methods, Oracle-based approach, where if you have to change one of them, you've got to really think through a strategy. Here we do, but the turnaround time is much, much lesser. We have some portal front-end solutions as well, so that we open up discovery, campaign management, user management, dashboard visibility, control tower, and so on. And we employ emerging technologies. It's all very, very new. Scala for high concurrency, Lift UI, and we also talk to our 1.0 applications in the data center that's here. So it's an integrated approach. This is more of an integrated view of the new platform and the old platform. Your click rate is a little.
That's right. Yeah, my strategy is not as good as I thought it was.
So let's talk a little bit about security. I think, Antonio, you want to. You got to point it and then click. Yeah, there you go.
Yes, I know exactly what's happening. He's falling asleep. The first kind of component of security for us is making sure that the access to the data from a user perspective is secure. So the first thing that we do to do that is we implement multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication is about going beyond typical password-based authentication, which is just something essentially. Multi-factor authentication also confirms that you physically have another device of some sort. So typically that's a phone. What happens is when you go to log in, you put in your password, that's the thing that you know. Then your device is constantly generating a time-based code. You put that in, that proves that you have your device itself. That's the thing that you have, and that's how we confirm. We add kind of an extra layer of confirmation that you are indeed who you say you are. So this is something that's taken off increasingly in the last couple of years, and it's finally gotten to the point where it's easy because everyone has mobile devices to really be able to add that extra layer of confirmation. So that's implemented throughout our portal solution, and it's just basically anyone who has admin level access right now, which means that they have access to a lot more of things like customer data and what have you, is required to turn this on. We don't even give them the option. They just have to set it up the first time they log in. Kind of in the same vein, when you actually establish a connection from your system to our system, we also use a two-factor authentication scheme. Essentially, when you set up your connection, you give us your URL, and we give you a URL to connect to. That URL is specific to you, so that essentially acts as the password. It's the thing that you know. And then we also have certificate-based authentication, and that's typically the thing that you have to prove that you are who you say that you are.
And we got a patent for that, so that was an interesting experience. In fact, I think one of the key differentiators there is, Dove has so many entities, and Bayer, Linksys, Covistro. By the time you choose to integrate your backend systems and either establish a single pipe into Elimica, or you have multiple pipes based on at what level you want to connect to Elimica, we have unique URLs for each one of those. So you can completely control the flow for each and every kind of business unit if needed. It could go down all the way to a distributor, to a warehouse. It could just be any level within your whole organization. So that's the level of flexibility we've added as well.
So part 3 is about the actual data once it's sitting in storage. This is independent of portal access. This is access to anyone in the organization. Data is completely secured. It's encrypted. And that's at its storage point. So we actually decrypt it on the fly when we read it back to provide UI information, to provide dashboard information, to provide debugging information. All of that is decrypted at that moment so that we can get to it, but when it's actually sitting in storage, it's completely encrypted. And then kind of the fourth bit of that's not actually useful unless you have a secure key management strategy for the encryption itself. So we actually have a single location that kind of holds the keys, and access to those keys is very tightly controlled. There are very few members of the team who actually have access to the keys themselves, and then they can delegate access to specific systems and specific components as needed to kind of execute your day-to-day operational work.
Yeah, so somebody in Amazon, if they get access to our data, because it's their servers, right? I mean, we are hosting it in the cloud. They might be able to yank out a portion of our data and run with it, go away somewhere. But the problem is they won't be able to decrypt it because the keys are not stored in the same place. So it's going to be pretty worthless. Well, we're going to lose data, but that level of breach is something that you don't commonly expect.
And we have a DevOps organization who is an analog to a traditional IT operations organization, and it's their responsibility to kind of manage these keys and delegate access as needed. So
that's security in a nutshell. Maybe we can make it interactive. So if you have any specific questions around this, we can tackle it. There's only 2 more slides, so.
I'm good. I think you answered the only question I had is number 1 optional. The answer is no.
Well, for admins, no, but then anybody else it's optional because we want you to also be part of it. And
there's basically an access level where we've said you have enough access that you don't get to use this without this layer of security, and below that.
Are you going to show that this afternoon?
Yes.
I mean, I've never...
Oh, yeah. It's going to be... That's how we're going to open the demo.
Okay, cool.
Because you can't log in otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. I have admin access for the demo. I just have to do this. We'll just show it there. It's not super impressive looking. I just put in a bunch of numbers.
Well, I think most of us have seen RSA cards.
Yeah,
I know we don't use them, but I think you've probably seen consultants that come in that have them. Accenture uses them.
Sure.
No, you've never seen the card that has the numbers on it?
Well, we have our CIO and our VP of security, so they can talk a lot about this topic.
But that technology has been around for quite some time. Yeah. Banks, financial institutions, but they actually in the late 90s were around.
Yeah.
So it's been around for a long time.
Yeah. All right, let's move on then. So the second topic is around stability. We've realized in the past that as a platform gets older, if you don't account for stability up front, then you cannot continuously prune it. And if you want to, after 5 years, you want to put in a stability-based exercise, then the cost of doing that is enormous. And then you need to keep track of how your system has grown, otherwise you won't be able to apply the right measures. So what we've done is we said, right from day one, we're going to give equal importance to security, to stability. And for that, we fundamentally use a queue-based mechanism. So the whole infrastructure is completely queue-based. We can go through some of the features.
So step 1 is kind of about ensuring that when you send us data, we don't lose it, right? So the kind of vanguard of how we ensure that is we've set up a store-first approach. What that means is when you establish a connection to Alembica and you send us a message, we're actually storing that before we do anything else with it. So when that connection terminates successfully, forget RAs, forget any additional messages. When the connection to transmit the initial message terminates successfully, you know that we have that message. That message is stored. It's stored, and we'll talk about S3 a little bit in the next slide, but it's essentially stored in a redundant fashion, and barring, something that takes out a whole bunch of data centers, it's not going to disappear. So that basically gives you the certainty that if if you're connected to us via HTTP, for example, and you get a 200 from us, a status code, that's it, we've got it.
We have it. We have it stored actually, so we can record the processing, or we can reprocess, or we can resubmit from that stage itself. So you don't need to do anything.
And that's a difference between what you have for one and
Oh, totally different. I mean, because this required a lot of work. We took a microservice-based approach. We said, let's add this separately. It's a standalone service, and we can scale that as well as needed based on the volume. So that's one of the advantages with this approach.
Yeah, and also once we've received it, it's stored and it's actually in a pending state and ready to be automatically pulled off and consumed by our processing pipeline. Which is working. Queue-based processing. So once we store a message, it starts entering one of a series of queues. Each one of these queues is basically a buffer zone. So it's a point where if the thing on the other side slows down, the thing that puts stuff into the queue doesn't have to slow down. So we have a few queues kind of laid out throughout the system at key points, and each one of those lets us kind of decouple the services and really not be as worried about when one service goes down or when it's having issues, it's backing up other services. The first one is particularly connectivity. So you'll be able to send us messages, and because of Store First, you'll be able to know that we've received them and stored them, whether or not we're having issues actually processing messages, for example. And then whether or not there are issues sending messages out, we'll keep processing messages. So each one of these components is separate, and it's separated by a queue that kind of absorbs any issues in terms of processing time and what have you.
Yeah, and I think the optimization here is between speed and stability. So in case we have problems, we are saying, obviously we'll try our best to not compromise speed, but if there is a serious problem, we're at least stable. We're not going unstable, and we're not losing messages. And we may slow down the processing a little. It's going to get dequeued and consumed at a particular rate. But as soon as we are able to identify the issue, fix it, spool up more instances, so whatever we need to do, processing is going to come back out again, and then it's going to start dequeuing from the queues.
These are parallel queue processing, not sequential.
No, it's a combination based on whether you're talking about the connectivity engine or the downstream service fabric-based processing. So it depends. We can have multiple service fabrics pulling from one queue. We can have multiple messages going into the same queue at the same time. So we have all those patterns available. And in fact, we can also fine-tune how we want to process this, either in serial mode or parallel mode, depending on how many instances, how we distribute it, and what are the processing requirements. You might come to us and say, hey, I have this special SLA with a logistics service provider, and you know what? I have to absolutely have parallel processing because it's coming from 3 different business units and they need responses approximately within whatever. So in which case we have to employ a parallel approach. We can give you a dedicated queue to process those messages. We could have a DAO queue out there. Obviously, you'll have to pay more.
That was going to say. Customer has not free for that.
Yeah.
We want that for the cheapest price.
We want it for free.
Yeah,
I didn't say that.
well, you know what, then you're not going to get a complete queue.
Sure.
You might just get a 0. So this is what we were talking about,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I mean, if you have large documents that need to go through a route, you have special processing that needs to go through another route, we can enable multiple channels for handling your data based on your business requirements. So what this fundamentally does is, it's specifically under stability, but most importantly, it's a feature that does not create a detriment to any other part of the system. So it is in the same realm as stability, but the key thing is we're giving you an additional feature based on your business process as opposed to just a technical message transmission.
And we've seen this.
Yeah.
One on platform where this is well, it actually screws everybody up.
It does.
Not just us.
It does. Yeah, you're right.
And we actually have more than just, there are like multiple levers that we can play with. So for example, everything could be going through the same queue, but we can set up a specific consumer that's handling large messages, for example. Or if we know ahead of time that large messages are going to be coming in, we can put it in a separate queue. So there are like multiple different ways that we can tweak how we do multi-channel data handling, and each one of them has obviously its trade-offs and its costs and what have you.
So there's a lot of granularity.
Yeah, it's very, very atomic, you're right. That's the key. Trading partner, pair, and document type. We can go down to that level for any processing in the system.
And then the last one that I think we sort of already talked about up here, which is that we've completely decoupled the connectivity and the data transformation. Data transformation happens in its own world, and it's buffered from message reception by a queue, and it's buffered from message delivery by a queue. So slowness on either side of those won't affect processing and vice versa.
So even if we are down, we are not down. That's one way to look at it, because the portion that faces your system is almost always going to be up.
We're like the Hydra. You can kill our service fabric, but we'll sprout 4 more to take up the slack.
Okay, scalability. I think this is an interesting one. So
yeah. So the first step of scalability is really to be able to provision a whole environment in a completely automated fashion. So this is kind of what the DevOps organization is charged with at its most fundamental, is taking the concept when you're running the cloud of allocating actual instances and machines, or virtual machines rather, setting them up with the appropriate software and getting them ready to receive requests or to process. Making all of that something that can just be executed at the press of a button, essentially. Or in our case, we can just issue a command from our team chat and we can roll up an entire branch, a new branch of code or what have you, or run a release just with one command. So that's kind of step one of how we can really pull off scaling, is having all of that automated, having everything configurable, and being able to say, I want a new one of these, I want a new one of these. Step two, once we have that, is now we have the ability to be able to say, oh, hey, there are a lot of messages coming in at this time of day. Every day at noon, we have significantly more message volume, so every day at 11:55, we're going to spin up a bunch of extra processing cores, or we're going to spin up a bunch of extra connectivity endpoints, or handlers rather, so that we can process all of that stuff faster. So part two is we have the ability to kind of scale the actual internals of the system to meet expected demand.
And I think another thing there is, so there are two extremes to that. And the first side of it is, as Antonio mentioned, we observe patterns and we kind of keep our house clean. But then the second part could be that you come to us and you say, you know what, we're going to test something, maybe with a partner or with 2 partners. Can you just provide us a separate path so that we just do these tests? And then once we are done, we are done. So we don't need to go ahead and procure infrastructure for you. We can just spool one up for like 2 days. And then once you're done testing, we bring it down and we're done with it. So you pay as you go allows you to do that. So it's an on-demand based model that we employ for utilization.
So part 3 is we talked about predicting or kind of observing higher load times. We talked about being told about higher load times. Part 3 is we can actually notice in an automated fashion, hey, there is significant load. It's 3 p.m. on a Friday and we don't usually get significant load, but we're seeing it, we're starting to back up, processing is starting to take longer than we'd like it to. We can set it up so that all of that, without any human intervention, triggers additional processing of whatever, or processing power of whatever kind it is that we need wherever we're observing the backup, and go ahead and spool up those systems, get them ready. They're automatically added, they automatically start pulling from the queues or putting into the queues, and then we kind of sit back. We'll get the alarm, we'll monitor to make sure that everything is doing what it's supposed to be doing, but usually we can sit back and just let that happen in an automated fashion.
And alert us?
I mean, yeah, if that's what you want in those cases, then yes.
So the way
Ideally, we don't have to.
Yeah, ideally we shouldn't have to, but just to give you a little bit of background, Larry, so there are 3 types of alerts that we currently have, 3 categories of alerts. So there is processing alerts, where we get a message, we fail for content, structure, etc., standard validation, and so on. The second type of alert is a delivery alert, where we're trying to, hey, I'm unable to reach you, so there's a problem. Or I couldn't send you a receipt acknowledgement within, maybe after 3 retries or within 20 minutes or whatever we decide. But the third type is a system alert, where it's primarily internal at this point in time, where we need to know which resources are not optimized or working suboptimally or are under stress. So that's the third type of alert, and we're talking about the third type here, which is primarily internal to Elenmica. But there's nothing preventing us from mutually agreeing upon, hey, let's talk about these thresholds, and then if it exceeds that, then we'll convert that to a special type of alert and specifically give you and maybe a set of users access to those subscriptions. So we can easily add that, and we have a feature token based approach. So you can give access to specific users, saying 2 of these users look at this. I'll only look at this. You can do all that.
Yeah, I mean, when we do cause you guys issue, usually the volume you're seeing is because something's going wrong. So when we go outside of our normal range of peak traffic, it's usually because something's going bad. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm curious about that. I mean, it's nice that you spool up additional processing to handle the load, but I'm going to say that there's a good chance that you have it because something's going wrong and maybe it doesn't need to be processed. Maybe we don't want to pay to process it.
Yeah, I think
Just something to think about.
I think one thing too, it's a very, very important point, because many, it's
And our partners do it to you guys too.
exactly, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to point fingers here, but
I can think of one.
systems will fail, right? I mean, left and right. I mean, they fail. But regardless of instead of blaming anybody, I mean, there is going to be problems that we need to solve. But if you are saying that we can establish a layer of collaboration and agree that if this issue occurs, then notify us without any bias, I think that's a great place to be, actually, because then all of us are looking at the same thing.
It protects everybody. I mean, we could have a vendor that sends you guys a large file unbeknownst to us.
Right.
We probably don't want to pay for that. We probably want to stop them from doing that.
Right.
Today, so we clobber you guys 2 or 3 times, and then you give us a call and say, could you talk to so-and-so, and then, it becomes a 6-month meeting sort of
That's
thing
right.
where they continue clobbering you guys,
That's right.
periodically, like every Thursday at 4 o'clock.
Vince, you want to talk a little about some of the experiences you had?
Well, no, there's particularly 2 of our largest customers that tends to happen. But I'm kind of curious, Larry, what you're thinking is that typically the system learning that Armin's talking about, we don't share them because we're talking tens of thousands of these things in like minutes. These are not typical, like, I tried to send you 200, can I send you an RA 3 times, it times out and you say, okay, something's wrong. We're talking literally sometimes in minutes where we'll get 10,000 of these things. So a lot of bells and whistles go off internally.
Yeah.
I'm sure we can provide the technology. I think we have to talk to you about the business logic of
That's right.
Well, that
tell us what you want as opposed, because I don't know if system-wise what you want. It might be something a little bit deeper. than
And
that.
it might not be
It could
either.
become a lot of white noise
Yeah.
you don't want to have.
Because I don't
Well, I
say-
already have a lot of that, and so do you guys. I mean,
Right.
no,
So,
which is actually is already a
Right.
problem for us.
right, what to ignore and what we should process. I mean, we don't know what happened to Thursday for.
Yeah, it's brutal. Yeah.
Yeah, but
And we have poorly behaving partners.
right. But
But we-
But we would like to notify you that, like, it shouldn't take us like 2.5 months to get to you. It should be like maybe maybe 30 minutes later, say, hey Larry, guess what?
Yeah, the
That's why
quicker, yeah, the quicker you guys get to us, the quicker we do get
Resolve the
it
issue.
fixed. Yeah. So that's all I'm thinking about.
No, absolutely.
I'm thinking you spool up a bunch of processes to process a 50 megabyte file that shouldn't be set in the first place.
Exactly.
That I don't want to pay for.
Right.
That you guys should not have to be dealing with. So yeah, I mean, I guess what are the business parameters is a good question, or it's probably
Yeah.
partner by partner basis.
One very interesting experience that we've had, and Vince, you may have more details, was another large customer of ours. There was a process implemented like 3 or 4 years ago, and we didn't even know about it, that they had an SLA of 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is. And all of a sudden, hey, there's trucks that are piled up. I'm like, so? what happened? Then we realized, no, those documents need to be transferred within less than 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And we really didn't know. It just happened. And so the process just keeps growing in size, and we don't always get involved because it's automated. So we don't know the data patterns. We're not tracking it. But now, with this, we have the ability to at least peek into it. And then, you're right, I mean, we can talk further to see if we can mutually agree on maybe certain categories of alerts that need special attention.
Probably worth mentioning is that there's
I was just going to agree with what you said about the alerts. I mean, a lot of times we have maybe some network changes,
Yeah,
and a limit can't get to us.
right,
And it could be hours before we know. And by the time we know, it's too late
right.
to fix it that day. So I think
When
it's
you
really...
say it's too late, what typically
Well,
happens?
because all of our support right now is over in Germany, so by the time we find out, they're gone for the
It's the
day.
end of the business day.
Yeah, that's a good challenge, an interesting challenge.
So, I mean, depending on what the issues are, it would be important to know as soon as it happens and not wait until 5,000 messages are queued up and waiting.
Agreed.
Because we've been talking about our ability to have what seems to be the whole supply chain stable. You're talking to us about business logic, saying, if you see this, like you said, Larry, this means something very different to us that we would want to know about.
Right.
And we have the technology to put it together. I'm not sure it's a system alert, but these are like business.
No, that's something we can talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see this type of shit, it's an LTM, an LTR, it's ocean, who cares about ocean rail? But truck roll, as we see, as one of our large customers in Germany, it's pretty time sensitive. If it doesn't happen in 10 minutes, trucks will stop on the N3 or 5.
There's cost implications
Yeah,
on the
you'll
other
see the
side.
trucks is backing up because they can't
Fines and what have you.
which port to go to.
We hurt you guys, and in turn, it sort of hurts my business customers. So we have a large logistics vendor that clobbers you guys. What ends up happening is that my orders inbound get delayed.
Right.
I have businesses that ship same day, ship 3 times a day.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
And that becomes a problem. So they don't get the orders at the cutoff. And the reality is that somebody I'm paying to help us do business is who clobbered you guys to begin with. So I make my own problems, and I make it for everybody. I don't just make it for a Dow, it makes it for your own network. So I'd like to avoid that because whereas it probably affects Fire, it affects me too. I hurt myself with some of the behavior that we see from our own partners.
Right.
And I'm sure it happens inside our own networks as well, but that's not
Yeah, no, it's a very valid point because we usually go on the defensive and try to, find solutions. But then sometimes, you're absolutely right, we just surface it and say, is this even needed to begin with?
certainly do it a better way.
Yeah.
This is kind of the last piece. I think it's implied in a lot of ways in what we're talking about, but the queues allow us to essentially distribute all of this traffic and all whatever happens if we scale up to whatever. It's all distributed across whatever instances we've brought up. So
Yes.
when we automatically scale whatever component of the system, all of those new pieces immediately connect and start receiving distributed traffic from the inbound stuff that they need to process.
Yeah.
Are you using one of those container technologies?
Not yet.
No.
They've become very popular. It's a couple standards seem to be.
Yeah, right now we're still sitting on top of standard VMs, but
Okay.
we have done a little bit of investigation into Docker.
Yeah. We use Docker a little, but it's
Docker's
mostly...
really hot.
Yeah, currently it's limited to more development stuff as opposed to
Okay.
production.
Yeah.
Some of the banks are using Docker, which always leaves me wondering.
I mean, we slowly started putting microservices now. Like I think we spoke about S3, and I think there's a couple more which are in the pipeline. Something around our, database agnostic facade pattern. So there we're trying to employ some microservices. The best way to deal with those from a deployment perspective is to containerize it. We're dabbling with it, but we're not there yet.
Cool.
I think that's all we had, right? So we can talk further. There's also a demo at 2:30, so I'd urge you to take a look at that if you're interested more in how the system does what it's supposed to do. We just spoke about what went into it, but to actually see what it does.
I know you said that Linksys is in the process
Yes.
of, are there any companies already on the platform?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's about, and depending on how you count, there's about 50 to 60 companies, but those are connections mostly through a hub, so we're kind of counting more than there should be. But fundamentally, I think we have about 6 or 7 unique connections on one side and maybe another 2 on the other side. So about 8 to 10 connections in total. The volume is not that high yet, but with Linksys and a couple of other companies that we're going to migrate, I think by Q1, I think it's just going to be like, 0 to 60 in 5 seconds.
They're about,
Kind of deal.
they're about 18 months in at this point.
Yeah.
Has anybody completed a migration?
No, we just started.
Okay.
We just started.
So I assume, so the partners you already have on the platform are newly implemented on 2.0?
Yes.
Net new came right on the
Yes.
2.0, that's correct.
And how many do you have that were newly implemented?
So, yeah, that's what I told you.
7?
Yeah, it's around 10 in total, depending on how you count it.
So how long is, like currently, we're on the older platform, so how long does it take to move to this new platform?
So it's a relatively broad question. Now, if you take Linksys specifically,
Okay.
just as an example, I think you do 2 or 3 custom processes. You do some things that are basic, and you do some things that are in the intermediate category. And I think for your logistics and order management, if my memory serves me right, we're looking at May for it to be complete. All of Linksys' traffic on the new system.
And when did they start it?
They started already. As in,
Okay.
you
Because,
don't have to do anything.
their processes would be very similar to ours.
Sure. So, yeah, I do see some other topics for conversation, which is very specific to you and Linksys. We should do that offline.
Okay.
But where I'm trying to get at is, we have something called a network bridge internally. So I showed you in the first diagram, 1.0 talks to 2.0, and it's interoperable, and you don't need to change anything on your side.
Okay.
So Linksys' message comes into 1.0, we are able to route it to 2.0 in real time, and then we intercept that request and route it to 2.0. In 2.0, we determine whether the processing and delivery needs to occur there or in 1.0. So based on a trading partner pair and document type combination, we can say, don't process it in 2.0, send it back to 1.0. So it just does a quick loop in that case. And there's the normal processing that occurs in 1.0 in that case. However, if we say that this trading partner pair and document type are upgrade candidates, then we have that flag there. So as soon as it hits that pattern, we start processing it in 2.0, and then we deliver it back to 1.0 to the partner. So effectively, you've been upgraded. It's just that your connectivity is still to the 1.0 system, which you can always move once you're done with all your migrations. So the key is to get the business processing, data processing in 2.0. That's what we mean by an upgrade,
Okay.
not the connectivity point. That's just a pipe, right?
And I think we'll briefly get into what that process
There's a
looks
scenario we're going to go through in the demo as well. There's a third scenario which shows how we enable the routing.
What about applications? So you guys have a lot of applications that I know we use. How many of them are already on the 2.0 platform?
With the applications, we use a integration strategy. So in other words, those applications will continue to stay currently on the 1.0 data, in the 1.0 data center, but the 2.0 platform, QuickLink platform, talks to all of them. So we are already able to talk to 2 of them. There's one more pending, which will be done in the next couple of weeks.
So there's no strategy to migrate them?
There
Is there a roadmap for that?
There is a longer term roadmap, but there is a few more, with applications, there are a few more competing products, if I may.
I understand.
So I think Rich might be a good person to talk to with regards to how you want, you do I think you do time slot optimization and
do.
TL5, right? You do.
We do.
Yes. So I think.
We use other stuff too. We use the RubberNet portal. and
Right.
We pretty much use all your applications.
We also talking to you about Dow Agro, I think.
That's the RubberNet portal.
Right. Right. So there's a
My
few.
customers here.
Yeah. So there's a few moving parts with Dow. Our objective currently, we call it a 1.5 kind of strategy.
Okay.
It's between 1 and 2. So we use the 2.0 messaging platform, but we use the 1.0 apps so that they can talk. We're also moving them to the cloud so that you have better stability and overall scalability. So those are some of the aspects we're working on for the applications first. We get them to a stable place because the applications are not in a bad shape, so to say. I mean, they're working fine. However, we want to make it 2.0, so we're using a market-driven approach there instead of just converting what we have. We're looking at mobile apps, we're looking at tablet-based apps and so on. So there's different strategy for the apps.
Well, I'm looking at it the same way, I'm looking at my value proposition, and if I look at the RubberNet portal, and for instance, if you guys really want to sell this, you have to explain to us how it will be cheaper to onboard my partners, in concrete terms.
Yeah. And I think there is going to be some of that tomorrow with you, I think. But fundamentally,
I'm struggling with that.
Yeah, it's not an easy topic.
I know.
Because it's one thing that we intuitively know, but we need to have critical mass to prove it to ourselves.
I think I copied you in my email with that exact point. I like the new platform. I can speak at lengths of how I think it will make our job easier and our business faster, but I need numbers.
Yeah.
This is not a small thing, and since you only have one partner that's migrating that has not, and nobody's completed the migration, this is a hard sell for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, we will discuss further tomorrow, but I don't know if it helps or not, but there are about 3 or 4 who are already lined up for future migrations, so you will probably be...
That does help.
Well, actually, there's 3 that actually paid.
Yeah.
So he said lined up, but they're physically paid, and
Yeah.
they're waiting.
They're waiting for execution.
We have
Fascinating.
We have 2 of our largest customers.
Borderline.
We're talking to 2 of our largest customers today as to who's going to go first, and we do have 3 paid engagements that we are holding off on because of these 2 large customers. So you can imagine those 2 large customers are outside names.
Well, that's good. That's good for you guys.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, there's going to be somebody who's going to be the first
Yeah.
one. We have 3 other projects with this large customer that may get signed very, very soon, within the next 2 weeks.
There is impetus, there's no lack of that, but I agree with you in that the value prop has not been clearly quantified.
And if you're looking for paying customers to do this, that's what we need. We need to figure out the value proposition for ourselves.
Right. Why did they do it? So
I have a lot of suspicious people that I work for, and without numbers, I'm not winning that argument. I'm not winning it emotionally, that's for sure.
We have to help you.
I know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not really sure how this applies to, us as a customer. How do we know we want to do this? Or what is, what do our customers have to look like to really get a lot of added value here?
Sure, I think that...
What?
Yeah, I have the same questions.
Right.
In the future, so that the platform that we're on now or that we're using, that's going to stay there, and as we onboard new customers, we're just going to continue to use that same one. There's never going to be, a switch over for newer customers or, that we're onboarding. I guess, I don't understand how that is.
Yeah, so what we're doing is, the general rule of thumb is if you're a brand new customer to Elevica, which you're not, then you're going to most probably go on the new platform. If you're an existing customer, then we look at whether you're on the upgrade path or not. We may have already reached out to Wacker, and I think we reached out to Wacker in Germany, and we started talking to them about the upgrade already. So I do not know exactly where you fit into the timeline from an upgrade perspective, but let's assume that you are an upgrade candidate, and let's assume it's going to start in January for the sake of our discussion. So if you're already in the pipeline, so if you're not in the pipeline, then you continue on 1.0 business as usual. But if you are in the upgrade, if you're an upgrade candidate, then we know when we're going to start moving you over, or which network, which part of your network is going to be moved over to the 2.0 platform. So in that case, we take an informed decision. We see what projects do you have in the pipeline, and as and when it comes into professional services through sales, there's a check that goes on internally to see if there is an impact to the upgrade or not. If there's no impact to the upgrade, then we take the decision accordingly. We say let them go on 1.0 for now. We'll add that to the 2.0 path. Or we say this is perfect. It dovetails really well into what we're doing. The timing works. So we say let's add it to 2.0 now, and we'll get a good packet for migration. So there's a lot of different combinations. So that was a very loaded question, but that's how we decide internally.
So, I mean, there could be, I mean, we could continue to operate and just keep current customers on the initial platform, and then some new customers
Absolutely.
would be converted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and the idea was, so there were two key things. The first thing was zero risk. So just because we move some of your customers to the new platform or move existing customers from 1.0 to 2.0, we don't want to introduce risk at all. So zero risk is one of our primary strategy. And the second thing is it has to just make sense to you. I mean, the timing has to work. So it's at the end of the day, it's still an implementation process. So we need to ensure that the project management side of it is aligned. Otherwise, we end up duplicating the costs. There's no. If you can wait for a month, for example, then if you're going to be on the new platform, is it worth the wait? Things like that. Because if you do it in 1.0, then we have to migrate it to 2.0. So it's duplication of work. You want to take that out as well. So a lot of factors go into optimizing it. Then there's region. Then there's business process. Then there's all kinds of. It's like a huge matrix. So,
So there's a lot of considerations
Yes.
in whether you would use one platform.
Yeah. There's a core team that we have who actually takes that decision. And we have a project management team that actually communicates very closely with the customers as and when we approach some of these upgrades.